Welcome back to another episode of Anxiety Chats. Today we are joined with a friend of mine, actually, called Darragh. She's living in Edinburgh and she's an Irish girl who is a mental health advocate online, which is actually how we met. It's quite a funny old story.
Yeah, it was actually. I always find, like, you talk about the power of being online and like the fact that I met you through like that experience. Yeah, it just shows you it can be really powerful, and it can, connect you to really like-minded people as well, and you can form really good connections that way.
100%. Like, it's kind of weird to think that we actually met
I know.
online. And we both met our boyfriends online, actually.
We did.
Online's not always
No,
bad.
it's not. Thank you, Tinder.
I know. I mean, really cute. We just ran each other at the bus stop, but it wasn't Tinder.
Well, hi.
Yeah, so me and Darragh, like I was saying, me and Darragh met online. We were both making YouTube videos at the time. I think I commented something on one of her videos that was really creepy, that was like, I know where you live.
That's right. I was like, I forget what it was. I know I messaged you, but you messaged me and it was like a video from inside my house, and I showed like a clip, like you kind of seen the street in the background, and then you said something like, oh, I know exactly where you are in Portobello or something, and I was like, oh my God. But like not in a...
So Darragh was like, should I befriend this person so she won't kill me, or should I run really far away and move back to Derry?
I was kind of like, oh, I just feel like, because like sometimes you don't really think about that whenever you are online. Now I'm a bit more aware of like if I'm on my own and I'm posting a video of where I am or something, like I'll post it later just in case. But in this instant, it worked out really well, because I was like, oh, you live beside me, and then to be honest, that changed my entire life. Like meeting you and meeting the circle of friends that I did there, it did completely change my life for the better, and I'm so grateful that you didn't know where I lived.
Guys, befriend your stalkers.
Yeah. It works out sometimes, it does.
If there's one thing you learn from this podcast episode.
Exactly. It's a good takeaway.
So the things that you were talking about at the time on YouTube was that when we first met was veganism. And this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it? And maybe less, around that time. And it was quite a big phenomenon at the time, where people were very much talking about veganism. It was kind of, would you go as far as to say a little bit culty?
It was at the time, but whenever I grew up in Derry in Ireland. It's a very, very small town, and I decided to go vegan, and I kind of wanted to get into the online world. And I was already posting about things like health and wellness and fitness, because I lost quite a lot of weight. I went on a kind of wellness journey, and people find it, quite inspiring. They followed my journey. And then when I went vegan, more people became interested in like, oh, what do you eat now? So I started posting about it. It started to get more attention, and I kind of just ended up becoming a vegan page then, because I was posting about it all the time and people were really interested in it. And it was like, at the time, I thought it was really cool that there was other people out there that were vegan, but it did feel a bit like we were like our own wee group and like cast aside from everybody else, like in our own wee bubble. Because I don't know, it was just that mindset that you got into. I think like other people kind of convinced you as well that like, oh, we're the vegans and everybody else is like so behind and they're like this or that, and you almost end up feeling that way in some ways. I felt a bit isolated from other people because I was vegan, because I felt like misunderstood.
I think that pack mentality is quite normal in human beings, because we want to identify with other people. We want to have things in common. And it's kind of like a biological, like animalistic thing where we're like, you need to find people that are like you so that you can survive. And it's quite normal for that experience. But you, after a while, I think, started to see the downfalls and, obviously having people analysing what you eat all the time. Did you ever get comments from people that were like, you shouldn't be eating that? Or something like that?
So whenever I started, like, I posted like a lot of what I eat in a day videos and stuff because I was into health and fitness, and I also like struggled with eating disorders quite a lot in my life, and I wanted to show, you know, like a balanced approach to eating, and like that was such a big journey for me too. So my eating was never like, it was always a bit messy for that reason because I was
Mm-hmm.
struggling with that. But I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think that people online didn't help that because, like, for one instance, I posted that I was eating Oreos one time, and people are like, there's palm oil in that. They're really unhealthy. Like, don't eat that. And I started to feel really like judged for what I did eat a lot of the time. And I would notice that when I was making, you know, choices for that day, it was more like, oh, what would, you know, I don't know if I would post that because people might feel like I was like
Mm-hmm.
scared to eat junk food. Like it almost turned into like orthorexia for me because I felt like even just being vegan wasn't enough because there was such a cult
Mm-hmm.
online. And I wouldn't even say like the cult was veganism because I truly believe that, you know, it can be a great lifestyle, but there was like a big vegan cult
Mm-hmm.
online at the time that was like high carb, low fat, only plants, only processed food.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine if that's what you want to do, absolutely, whatever works best for you. But whenever you start judging other people and, you know, analyzing other vegans for how they're eating,
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't really understand that because I was like, we're the same, you know. Why are you trying to nitpick my veganism? Like it was just a bit crazy, but
And just generally, like eating, I think a lot of people, especially young
mm-hmm,
women, have some form of, you know, they've had
mm-hmm,
thoughts of, you know, things making them fat or things, body image or um, like what they should eat and shouldn't eat. And what would that, like, I think most young girls grow up with that mentality, even still now, of like skinniness,
mm-hmm,
all that kind of
mm-hmm.
stuff. And so being actually kind of, it sounds like kind of your fears were coming true of people actually commenting on what you were
Yeah.
eating, being like, oh, it's so awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like of course, like I fought against that as well, but of course it did get to me as well because you know, I'm a young person
Mm-hmm.
that's suffering with like anxiety, and also being on the online in the online world is a really scary thing for a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people. It takes a lot of bravery to put yourself out there, and it can cause extreme anxiety. And as you know, it has done for me for years, but that's something that I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it at that time I was very young and had a lot to learn, and I wasn't feeling very mentally strong, and it really got to me in the end and caused several periods of really poor mental health.
Mm-hmm. And then you also kind of, when you're in that phase, can blame yourself and be like, why am I like this? Why am I the, like,
Mm-hmm.
why can't I do anything right? Why, you know, what's the point in me trying and
Mm.
stuff like that? Those are the kind of thoughts that we can get when actually it's like, actually, the circumstances and environment you were in
Mm-hmm.
were a perfect breeding ground for
Oh
anxiety.
yeah, and like with my anxiety as well, I feel like I want to be invisible. And sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
just got so much that I just was like, I need to take myself off the internet completely and just hide from the world. Um, and you know, that came to a very abrupt end whenever, you know, I decided that I didn't want to be vegan anymore, which was something that I never thought would happen to me. I, you know, had a vegan
Mm-hmm.
platform. I was very passionate about it. I was vegan for like ethical reasons as well. Um, but there came a point where my body, like, I started having dreams about eating fish, like, genuinely
Mm-hmm.
having dreams. And there was something in me that just shifted. And I think it was when I was trying to really recover from my like eating disorders and stuff like that. There was this voice
Mm-hmm.
that was telling me that you need to be allowed to eat foods that you want to eat. And it something shifted in me, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to get rid of all rules, like all rules
Yeah.
completely. And I know that like it was a very, very difficult decision for me to make because it went against everything I had believed for so long, but I couldn't ignore the fact that I just still felt like I was restricting myself, and I wasn't truly able to heal from my eating disorder because I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like taken on another form for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's kind of beautiful, like you choosing yourself and your own well-being and mentality over something that I understand. It must have been really hard because when you're passionate about something and you believe in something, it's really hard to go against that. But you chose your own well-being and yourself over that, which is what we need to do. And I was the same. I was vegetarian for like 5 years, and then I can't remember what it was, but my anxiety was just so bad. I felt so awful. I was like, I need to just go back to basics a bit and be allowed to have, and also the freedom of just being able to have, make things easier, or like order takeaways that was easier, something that was going to help me live my life. That's the most important thing.
It is such a freeing thing, and I know like people that still feel very ethically would like highly disagree with that, but I think you need to be in that mentality to really understand it. Things like I've baked cupcakes with my granny since I was a child, and I remember her baking me my favorite cupcakes, and me saying that I couldn't eat them, and things like that. And you're like, that, what's more important, you know, like
Yeah.
things like that now. And I know it's just a cupcake, but to me, I was like, she made them for me, not realizing that I couldn't eat them anymore because it was like our thing when we were wee, you know. And yeah, fair enough, some people might make wee exceptions like that, but I just needed that freedom back. I think that freedom to just be, just, there's no way to describe it unless you've been through it, I think.
For sure. I think also the world's hard enough without judging each other on what we're eating, especially now, especially when people go through disordered eating. Like, that's a really serious thing, and the most, like, a very, very serious mental health, stuff. The most important thing is that somebody feels safe around food, I think, especially in those circumstances. And you've come such a long way with that. Like, it seems like would you say that you enjoy food more now?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think I probably will struggle with it, like with those thoughts for the rest of my life. And unfortunately, that is just the way it is. But I'm definitely so much better than I used to be. And now I recognize whenever certain, thoughts come into my head, I'm able to challenge those and, combat it with rational thinking, with, logical thoughts. It's just recognizing the patterns that maybe you didn't recognize before, and just getting strong enough to be like, actually, no, that's not how we're going to deal with that. And recognizing that, like, oh, I'm just wanting to do that because I feel sad and I'm looking for a coping mechanism. It's it takes a while.
I 100% get that. I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but like, I kind of feel like disordered eating and OCD can be quite similar, because it's like, it's something in your brain that's trying to keep you safe by having some element of control. But the best thing you can do for yourself, like you just said, is like recognizing, oh, that's a disordered eating thought, or oh, that's an OCD thought. Is that helping me? Probably not.
Yeah.
It's probably making things worse. And it's obviously so much easier said than done when you're in the throes of those. But like, it sounds like we can both say that we've come a long way from those kind of thoughts. And like you said, it doesn't mean that they're going to go away forever. They might never. But it sounds like you're in a much stronger place to be able to, like, not let those thoughts consume you.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's how you can really, like, there's no cure all for mental health conditions. There isn't. We all live with some degree of mental struggle. Some people so much worse than others, but it's how you deal with them and how you try to cope with them that changes it, I think.
And the way that other people react to it, like, obviously we became friends through that time, and you've seen me in some like really difficult panic, agoraphobia times, and I've seen you through some difficult times too. And it's about just not judging each other, not judging what that person's going through. You might not understand it, but like respecting that's how that person feels. Giving them space when they need space, giving them love when they need love. Like, that's the most important thing you can do for a friend, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of the vegan lifestyle that I think you experienced was kind of behind the scenes of what Instagram was. And that's something that people have talked about a lot in the past few years. There's been documentaries made about it. There's been, so many things that have happened that we're kind of more aware. Obviously, that's not what it's actually like behind closed doors, but you've actually seen firsthand some fairly big influencers and what they post online and what they're like behind closed doors. What was that like?
Well, so whenever I had my platforms, I followed so many vegan influencers, and we were all like really friendly online and stuff like that. And I thought, like, wow, like I want to be just like them. Like, they're living the dream life. This looks so good. Like, they're all in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and they're like cycling about and they're eating bananas, and it looks great. I have no desire to do that anymore, but at the time I was like, oh, living the dream. And then I actually met face to face a lot of the people that I was friends with online, and it just like blew my mind that they were nothing like that. And I realized that it was all really, really contrived. And I think that ruined Instagram for me, because at that time I was really like just posting whatever I wanted, photos that like weren't necessarily like really perfect looking, or just posting whatever, and I loved it. And then I met people that told me that I needed to up my game, and that I needed to start taking posed photos, that I needed to start posting at certain times, and I needed to like just all these things that I started to feel like very, very self-conscious about what I was posting online now and whether it was good enough. And it really, really took a toll on my mental health. And I think that's when I started to spiral with the whole social media thing, because it was like, as somebody that struggled with, anxiety and eating disorders, I really struggle with perfectionism. So like my perfectionism just poured into my social media, and it became really, really toxic for me then, which was a shame, because, I wish I could have just told Darragh back then, like, what you're doing is fine. It's wholesome. It's good. You don't need to be this perfect person online. It's not necessary.
Also, Instagram, like the name Instagram came from Instantgram, so instantly posting photos. But nowadays, it's literally, you wouldn't really see a photo on Instagram that wasn't edited.
Yeah, that is true.
Or, and I think that wasn't the intention of the person that created it. It was like instant. You just take a photo and then you put it straight up, which is why I quite like Instagram stories now, because I think it's just much more authentic and real. Yeah. But also behind those people, I totally understand that for them, having a perfect Instagram is important, and it feels like an extension of them, and it feels like they have to do that, or they aren't liked, or it's usually coming from a place of insecurity and unhappiness.
Yeah, and
but I just thought that was really interesting.
I definitely seen that.
Exactly.
With
it's not usually happy.
No, influencers that I like, really like, the bigger ones that I thought were incredibly free and happy, seen straight off that they were complete, like, one of them, I'm not going to say who, but like actually said to me, or I said, oh no, I don't really like to check my phone first thing in the morning. Like, I like to do this and that. And they were like, I can't even imagine getting up in the morning and not checking how many people like me. And I was like, that's actually quite sad. Like, that's a really sad way to live. And that's like a trap that a lot of us can fall into on social media, especially if you're doing it as a job. But I think when you base your self-worth on how many people like your content, then it's such a dangerous, dangerous road to go down, and can really be detrimental to your mental health.
100%. And also things like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Remember there was like maybe last year at some point, there was a day that they all went down.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, if everybody's relying so heavily on all of this, at any point all of this could go.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that's a really important thing to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Also wondering, you're now on Instagram as a mental health influencer
Mm-hmm.
or advocate.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel now compared to that?
It feels good. I have had a really, really complicated relationship with social media, as you know. But I've went through some massive changes in my own life. And I've really like gotten, help for my mental health, and I've started to realize, why that was. And it was anxiety and fear of like putting myself out there and doing these things, because I think I've
Mm.
always felt like I'm like too much. Like, because I've
Mm.
got such a big personality, and like I'm loud and proud, and like I don't hold back whenever I say things. I get really passionate about them. Like I'm really like all or nothing
Mm-hmm.
kind of person. And I've always been like, oh God, like the anxiety was stopped me before. But recently I've had this realization that it's like, that's just who I am. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is who I
Mm-hmm.
am. And I think I've spent so much of my life trying to fit into like a box of social structure that I just
Yep.
am never going to fit into. And I'm okay with that now. I'm completely
Yeah.
okay with that now, and actually just choosing to use it to my benefit and be like, well, if I'm a type of person that is okay with putting myself out there online and being that person,
Mm-hmm.
then I can use that for good and help other people.
Yes. Because I think even people that aren't using like, obviously we both use Instagram in a way that's maybe different
Mm-hmm.
than the average
Mm-hmm.
person, because we maybe are advocates, or you know, I work with anxiety chats, like all that kind of stuff. But for the average person, that makes me, I don't know, I didn't mean for that to sound really like, for the like not like us, for the average person, you know, like those average ones, we're actually quite
Yeah, for the
special.
normal people.
I didn't mean like that at all, but I just meant for the average
Mm-hmm.
user. I think even they can find it quite anxiety ridden of like, what do I post? What if I
Mm-hmm.
post that and that this person thinks this? Or what if my ex sees it? What if my best friend sees it and she's
Yes.
worried about? It's just constant,
Mm.
constant. And also even just scrolling down Facebook or Instagram, it's like constant. Everything's just constant, and it's always, it's just a lot, isn't
Yeah.
it? So I think being in control of what you're posting, having fun
Mm-hmm.
too, like having fun with
Mm-hmm.
it, not taking it too
Mm-hmm.
seriously, and also connecting with people. Like through anxiety chats, we've connected with people all over the world on topics that are important, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was one of my other questions to you, was you're living in Edinburgh, but you're from
Mm-hmm.
Derry. And we've spoken about before, and you've spoken online before about how um, maybe it's not quite as, it's still maybe a little bit of a taboo topic in parts of
Mm-hmm.
Ireland,
Yeah.
mental health and
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. It has been throughout my entire life. And this is a really, really sad fact, but the suicide rate in Derry, like where I come from, is extremely, extremely high, to the point that when, the newspapers or like online pages and stuff now post that, the helicopter's up, which means, somebody's gone under the water, that it's just almost normal, which is really, really
Mm-hmm.
messed up. Like it happens that much.
Yeah.
And it's always just that fear of like, oh, who is it this time? What's happened? And it is
Mm.
so, so sad. And I think moving to Edinburgh made me realize that that is not normal for so many people in one place to commit suicide. And it is because the mental health, like the resources in Derry are so limited, because there's no money. There's no money there. I think
Mm.
the economy and stuff is getting a bit better in Derry, but as from when I was very young, it's a place that there's not a lot of money being poured into it, and there's very limited resources, especially for mental health. It can be very difficult for people to get the help that they need. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a great deal to do there. I grew up just like all there was to do was to drink. They just get drunk like on the streets and then the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's like barely anything to do. You could maybe go to the cinema, or go bowling, but that
Mm.
was about it. And that was like what you did all the time as a child. So you're like, well, I'm bored of that now.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas here in Edinburgh, there's it's just insane how much more there is here. You know, it's people don't realize there's more out there, and you know, things can get better.
Yeah. And what's the like attitude of people in Derry or like Ireland, or I know that you've only lived in Derry in Ireland. What's the attitude? Are people quite like vocal about the fact that they need things to change, or do you think people are still struggling to ask for that?
It's a bit of both. I think because the suicide rate has gone up so much, there are more and more young people speaking out now, and even older people as well. But that's definitely something that's come with the newer generation, because the newer generation, we are, and people younger than us, we are more vocal about these things because we realize that it's wrong, that this is happening, and we can't really understand why the people in the generations, you know, before us, why they don't want to talk about things whenever it's such an issue. We're so much more outspoken now, and we're more open. But growing up, it was very much like I was raised with like, oh, life's hard, but we just get on with it. Like, just get on with it, just get on with it. You'll be grand. That's like in Derry, you'll be grand. You'll be grand. It's fine. Like, so you would feel like silly for, you know, talking about these things. I remember like I went through a lot of stuff in my childhood that was extremely difficult. And I remember going to counselling in secondary school. And I remember being in my dad's house, and I'd come home and like my stepmom's auntie or something was there, and I'd say, oh, like today at counselling or something. I remember my dad shot me a look like, shut up. Like, do not, why did you say that you were doing bloody counselling? Like, and I remember being mortified. And then I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was something that you wouldn't say, do you know? And I realized then that like, you don't talk about that sort of thing. That's not okay to talk about your mental health, or to talk about the fact that you're seeing a counsellor, because that's embarrassing. That's private. And, you know, my dad is great when it comes to mental health now, but, you know, I think he's learned a lot. And I think like my family are a lot more open, but there definitely is still that mentality of like, oh, it's a bit of a subject. You don't want to get into it too much, you know? So
it's definitely, like there's a lot of older generations that definitely still probably feel that way. Which is just, I think to us, like our generation, to me anyway, feels mad, because the human being, the average human being, they're basically made up of emotion and feeling. That's the number one thing we kind of experience every day, is different emotions, and that's just what we are. We're just a bag of emotion. I am anyway.
Same. But it's really good because like a lot more young people are talking about it, and I was really proud of my brother Connor recently. Actually, he did like a charity boxing match to raise money for men's mental health in Derry. So like things like that, you know, I was so proud of that.
And I mean, people talk a lot about like the cycle breakers in a family, and they're the people that put themselves on the line and have to be really quite brave. Like even coming on this podcast today, that's pretty brave to be like, right.
Thank you.
Because I imagine there's still things on your shoulder kind of being like, are you sure you want to do that? Just there's always going to be those kind of background noise of like past generations maybe, or like inner, I don't know, just self-consciousness or whatever, but choosing to be like, I hear those voices, but I'm still choosing to do this today. That's really cool.
Thank you. I think we hear other people's voices all the time in our head, don't we? But I think realizing that it is social pressure, and just because somebody else has a certain opinion, it doesn't make it fact. It doesn't make it true. And I think that's something I've really learned recently. Just I don't know what way my brain works, but you know, I think it's more of a social thing. I think we all do it, but like if a group of people feel a certain way, you feel like, oh well, that must be true then. Like when it's not necessarily true at all.
I absolutely feel like that. Like there's certain things I'm very passionate about, and I'm like, I know that's how I feel about things, but I'm also very gullible. So if somebody tells me something, I'll believe it. And it's quite hard. Like I even now I'm like, wait, when somebody said that when I was younger, that's not true. Now that I think about it, like I'm just constantly uncovering things like that.
Tell you about the time that like, because my dad's great granny was Italian, they told me when I was a child that Andrea Bocelli, the blind opera singer, was my cousin, and I believed it until I was like 20. I like told everyone.
Did you tell
I
people?
told everyone.
Oh no!
Like,
bless
it's
your
like
head.
performing like opera for like the most gorgeous stage in Adelaide. I'm like, he's my cousin.
You were like, this song's dedicated to me, actually.
To my family.
My last question for you was, do you have a story that you could share with us about a time you experienced anxiety?
I feel like I've experienced so many stories. But because obviously we have talked about, you know, the vegan, I think just like it's hard to really pick one particular story because I think I've let anxiety rule my life for so long now, and I think it's always going to be there. It's always going to be a background thing. But I think the fact that we've talked about, you know, me starting social media and stuff again today and having, you know, the bravery to do that after such a like rocky journey with that, I think is a really important story. I think I like, if anybody was listening to this that felt that fear of, you know, being themselves online, if they're like, oh, I want to, you know, influence other people, or I want to help other people, I want to start talking on my platforms, but I'm really scared. I'm really scared of who's gonna watch it. I'm scared of who's listening. Like, oh, what if they watch it? Or, you know, certain people in your life have made you feel, you know, maybe silly for doing it. I would just say that if there's something that you really, really want to do and you keep getting called to do it, like you've got this feeling inside you that it's the right thing to do, just recognizing that it is fear holding you back, that it is anxiety holding you back, and that these thoughts that you're having, they're not necessarily true. Like the amount of scenarios that I've made up in my head of certain people thinking certain things, whenever I'm like, that has never happened, and it is just a thought. It is just anxiety telling me this. And having the bravery to do the thing even though you're scared. You know, and it can be really scary. That's so much easier said than done. But like, I still feel scared, you know, putting myself out there online. But the more that you just do it, and it builds your confidence in yourself and your ability to do the scary things and to do the things that make you anxious. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, do the thing even though you're scared. Sometimes.
That's something
depends what it is.
I've been totally trying to do recently. Well, yeah, and it's okay if sometimes you're like, nope, definitely too scared today. That's fine. Then you can rest that day. But generally speaking, it's like you don't have to experience no anxiety in order to do something. In fact, that's probably never going to happen. And a certain level of anxiety is good too. It means you care about it. It means, you know, your body's working how it's meant to. Everyone experiences anxiety. But I've been trying to do that recently too. I've been like, you're going to feel anxious when you do this, but that's okay. It's not dangerous.
Yeah, I think it is quite helpful. But you're right in what you say. It is just trying to keep you safe from something that, you know, you think is going to do you harm. But I think realizing I'm going to be okay. Like it's going to be all right. And you might even help a few people along the way, you know.
100%. Well, it's been really lovely to talk to you today, Darragh.
Thank you for having me.
We will have Darragh's links in our description of wherever you're listening to this podcast. Also, if you would like to come on the podcast and chat with me about anxiety, I would love that. The links are in the description. You can also send your anonymous story. If you're not quite ready to come on the podcast, that's okay. We would love to hear your anonymous stories. Anonymous?
That's a hard word.
Thank you very much for... Thank you very much for listening today, everybody, and I'll see you soon. Bye.